In due time, Mr. Micawber's petition was ripe for hearing, and that gentleman was ordered to be discharged from his debts under the Act, to my great joy.
Mr. Micawber returned to the King's Bench prison when his case was discharged, where the club received him with transport and held an harmonic meeting that evening in his honour, while Mrs. Micawber and I had a lamb's fry in private, surrounded by his sleeping family.
On such an occasion, I give you, Master Copperfield, the memory of my papa and mamma.
Are they dead, ma'am? I inquired, after drinking the toast and a strong glass of flip.
My mamma departed this life before Mr. Micawber's difficulties commenced, or at least before they became pressing. My papa lived to bail Mr. Micawber several times and then expired, regretted by a numerous circle.
May I ask, ma'am, what you and Mr. Micawber intend to do now that Mr. Micawber is out of his difficulties and at liberty?
My family are of opinion that Mr. Micawber should quit London and exert his talents in the country. Mr. Micawber is a man of great talent, Master Copperfield.
I said I was sure of that.
My family are of opinion that with a little interest, something might be done for a man of his ability in the custom house. The influence of my family being local, it is their wish that Mr. Micawber should go down to Plymouth. They think it indispensable that he should be upon the spot.
That he may be ready, I suggested?
Exactly, that he may be ready in case of anything turning up.
And do you go too, ma'am?
The events of the day, in combination with the flip, had made Mrs. Micawber hysterical, and she shed tears as she replied, I will never desert Mr. Micawber. The pearl necklace and bracelets which I inherited from Mamma have been disposed of for less than half their value, and the set of coral, which was the wedding gift of my papa, has been actually thrown away for nothing. But I will never desert Mr. Micawber. No, I never will do it. It's no use asking me.
Mrs. Micawber having now raised her voice into a perfect scream, I was so frightened that I ran off to the club room and disturbed Mr. Micawber in the act of presiding at a long table and leading the chorus of Gee up Dobbin, gee ho Dobbin, gee up Dobbin, gee up and gee ho ho, with the tidings that Mrs. Micawber was in an alarming state, upon which he immediately burst into tears and came away with me with his waistcoat full of the heads and tails of shrimps of which he had been partaking. Emma, my angel, cried Mr. Micawber, running into the room. What is the matter?
I will never desert you, Micawber, she exclaimed.
My life, said Mr. Micawber, taking her in his arms, I am perfectly aware of it.
He is the parent of my children. He is the father of my twins. He is the husband of my affections, cried Mrs. Micawber, struggling. And I never will desert Mr. Micawber.
Mr. Micawber was so deeply affected by this proof of her devotion that he hung over her in a passionate manner, imploring her to look up and to be calm.
But the more he asked Mrs. Micawber to look up, the more she fixed her eyes on nothing. And the more he asked her to compose herself, the more she wouldn't.
Consequently, Mr. Micawber was soon so overcome that he mingled his tears with hers and mine, until he begged me to do him the favour of taking a chair on the staircase while he got her into bed. I would have taken my leave for the night, but he would not hear of my doing that until the stranger's bell should ring. So I sat at the staircase window until he came out with another chair and joined me.
How is Mrs. Micawber now, sir? I said.
Very low, said Mr. Micawber, shaking his head. Reaction. Ah, this has been a dreadful day. We stand alone now. Everything is gone from us. Mr. Micawber pressed my hand and groaned, and afterwards shed tears.
I was greatly touched, and disappointed too, for I had expected we should be quite gay on this happy and long-looked-for occasion. But Mr. and Mrs. Micawber were so used to their old difficulties, I think, that they felt quite shipwrecked when they came to consider that they were released from them.
All their elasticity was departed, and I never saw them half so wretched as on this night, insomuch that when the bell rang and Mr. Micawber walked with me to the lodge and parted from me there with a blessing, I felt quite afraid to leave him by himself. He was so profoundly miserable.